I invite Priscilla Nwikpo, a proud Ogoni woman, to take the platform.
Thank you so much, Sir Dele. Thank you. Why, good afternoon to the chair, the leadership of the Fatherland Group, my fellow panelists, and of course, our distinguished audience. Welcome, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my thoughts on the Biafra conversation. Because of time, I am going to keep it simple. As it's been said already, my name is Priscilla Nwikpo. I was born in the Garden City of Nigeria, known to most of us today as Port Harcourt, in the 1970s. And I am of Ogoni, of the Ogoni ethnic group in Rivers State. The Ogonis are said to have migrated from Ghana. When you hear that, you just think, oh, that's odd. But then if you're from Ogoni and if you're familiar with Ghanaians, then you would see the similarities. There are some similarities between us. So that's quite interesting. And I'm hoping that my presentation will answer the question I was called upon to answer earlier. And I have to say this to you, Jite, I had no idea that my presence will cause so much emotion, but anyway, I am a broadcaster of over 10, I'm a broadcaster, as you've heard already. And in the last 10 years, I have commented extensively on political and cultural affairs, either of Nigeria, of Africa, and of course, what happens here in the UK and around the globe as well. So our title for today's conversation, Biafra, the Eastern nationalities, who's in, who is out? A question I welcome very much because, you know, we're not often asked, are we in or are we out? And I think it's a question, it's a conversation that really needs to be had. So let me try and quickly get into it. So as I mentioned earlier, I was born in Port Harcourt, the Garden City of Nigeria. Port Harcourt is located in Rivers State. I call it a very cosmopolitan city in Nigeria because it comprises of so many different ethnic groups. And it is, though it has very close proximity to the eastern region, to the Igbos, as it were, I call it the melting pot of Nigeria because in Port Harcourt, you will meet everybody. You will meet us from the north, from the south, from the east, from the west. You meet the minority ethnic groups as well. But once you go across to, say, the West, you struggle. They don't understand the rest of us who are not part of a huge tribe, and we're not, we don't make up one of the big threes or, the big four when you include the Jaws, because, they run right across the southern coastal area there. So, but yes, so it's a city that, I love very much. As one who was born in the 70s, I recall that when I was growing up in Nigeria, I would often hear in conversation with my elders the phrase before the war or after the war. These phrases were used to landmark events or conversations or stories in a conversation, for instance. So in effect, stories will often commence with before or after the war. We would then be, I was also told that I was born after the war. So, we use it as that great reference point, and then we'll go on into recalling the detail of the scenario or what happened in that period, or, you will then hear these stories. So it's difficult for me to forget the war. In essence, even though I was born after the war, I often imagine the war just from listening to the experience of my parents, other relatives who were caught up in the war and who also fought to stay alive. Especially the story of my father when he tells me how he was held at gunpoint, and the fact that he's here. That story always runs through my mind. And if he hadn't survived that point, I guess I won't be here. Anyway, so the Nigerian state, as we know it, is full of contradictions from the document that we refer to as our constitution to how our regions are described. Most Nigerians, when you hear them, them speak, when they hear the East, they conclude that those of us in the South, which is known as the South right now region, are Easterners too. That, of course, is no fault of their own. I don't blame them. However, this stems from the unfortunate way our regions have been divided and subdivided and redivided over the years. So I'm just going to borrow a little bit from the beautifully put together chronology of our chair. He talks about the area that was known as the oil protectorate by the colonial masters in the 1800s, which then became the southern protectorate by the 1900s. And then the protectorates were then amalgamated to create what we know today as Nigeria. We see that from that timeline, there were further divisions. So we started renaming. Then so if you go to, let's go to 1939, for instance, divided it to the South. So in that divide, we created the Southwest and the Southeastern region. The South itself no longer existed. That just literally disappeared. And then the Southern area, as I've said, was co-opted into that. Then we come to the 1940s, and again, we redivide the division and finally create the Southern states. So the Southern states that were part of the Southeastern states now comes back to become a Southern state. You don't really have to be a rocket scientist to see what's happened there, but simple geography should really be able to make it clear. But, you cannot have a North without a South, but in Nigeria, we always try the impossible, and sometimes we actually make it stick. It is from this mess, I believe, that the confusion of what is being described as the map of Biafra today originated from. And of course, the Eastern nationalities, as we constantly say, though many will argue with me, and of course that's their right, as it's already happened without me speaking. This is happening largely because our true history has never it's been distorted, and so many aspects of it has been missing and not taught to us, a bit like how history is taught here in the United Kingdom, really. So the southern region of Nigeria is where you will find some of the finest indigenous groups of people. Of course, I'm biased, I come from there, who the colonial masters were concerned about because of their brilliance, because of how wonderful, how great they were, whether that was in their thinking, in their abilities, or in what they were doing when they arrived. These groups, though, are they also make up some of the groups who are very small in number as well, but they're within their respective identities. But they are warriors, make no mistakes. They understand who they are, they understand their identity, and they will stand to fight for themselves. We can't take away, of course, from the larger group within this group, which are the Ijaw nation, as we've already heard there from one of my co-speakers. And indeed, they were one of those who were already agitating, from the beginning of time, as it were, for most of us, to say we need more equity. This has to be better than what it is, given what they were contributing. But back to the war. When that war broke out, I was told that the Southerners were automatically co-opted into this war, and they were fighting quite literally as Biafrans, and they were also fighting to defend themselves. For them, they faced two primary issues. The first one was that they were, whilst they were fighting this war, the Igbos were dominating them, and they were suffering. The second, you're fighting a war with the Nigerian government on one hand, and on the other hand, those that you're fighting with are literally oppressing you and dominating you. And so for them, it was two aspects, and this had a great bearing on them. So why do I say I'm not a Nigerian? I'm not a Biafran. I am a Nigerian. I say that I think that is very simple. As much as, Sir JC, you say that I'm bearing an Igbo name and I'm denying my nationality, my ethnicity. No, I don't understand my name to be an Igbo name. I understand my name to be an Ogoni name. So as much as we may have a similar or the same name in Igbo, it doesn't mean that, you know, I am from that particular tribe. At least I've not been told so. And I've tried to look into this also, and I haven't found it, because I've had Igbos come up to me times past to say, but you have an Igbo name. I said, okay, I didn't know that, that it was an Igbo name, but here we are. So the answer to this is very simple for me. And it largely for me, it stems from the experience of my ancestors, family members, and of course, you know, what we have experienced within that region. And the history suggests that we've never been asked. For those of us in that southern, you know, area, we've never been asked. River State itself has 27 local government areas. Before, you know, what we know as Bielsa today existed, it was part of River State. So when you consider the different ethnic groups that make up, at least somebody should speak to us. We should be able to have a conversation about this. So we've never been asked. We've always been grouped and regrouped. And in so doing so, because of the limitations of our numbers, you know, when you have so many different little tribes together, then you know, we've ended up, as it were, being sort of caught up in the mess and manipulated to an extent. So, sorry, where am I? Oh, but having said that, we've always contributed to Nigeria, to feeding the nation. And in spite of the betrayals and the challenges that we suffer, which I'm sure, which some has been mentioned, I'm sure many more will be mentioned later by, you know, my co-speakers, we continue to do that. So you see, the domination of oppression by the Igbos that was suffered by the Southerners, as it were, it serves as a barrier. It's left a scar. And so it makes it very difficult when the question of Biafra is mentioned, you know, that we don't automatically, although we sympathize, do not get me wrong. I understand the Biafra fight, and I empathize very much with them. I don't agree with the map that has been drawn, because the map takes us back to the old Eastern region without a conversation, which again simply deletes our existence. I have always advocated for Nigeria to remain together, because I believe that together we are stronger. However, I recognize that the Nigerian state as it stands lacks equity and fairness. Much as I sympathize with my Igbo brothers and sisters, and I admire them, because I admire their ability. I admire the fact that they can travel across Nigeria and set up state and do what they need to do. I think this is fantastic, but I don't think that they will be able to achieve their Biafra requirement without working with others, which already has been stated. And in order to be able to work with others, we've got to have this conversation, and we've got to do pretty much as it is with the Nigerian state. We need to have this conversation and be fair in what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how we intend to go forward as a group. Because without that, understanding what other parties want, understanding what they can contribute, and being able to say, yes, this is what we can all bring on board, then we can work together and go forward. But if we just think that we're just going to just move together because once upon a time a map was constructed that included us as such, no, that cannot be. And we cannot continue to also run on the old colonial maps and divisions that was in place before now. We need to be able to take a look at that and address each other as brothers and sisters, as a family, and say, right, we recognize what our colonial masters did. We recognize the effect and the impact of that. But now we're going to be, if we're going to go forward, let's do it better. We can't do it, still continuing, making some of us becoming victims in our own land, or, having these issues. We simply cannot do that. And we have to be prepared, first and foremost, to look one another in the face, admit our wrongs, apologize, and work on a way forward. Because I am absolutely certain that with that, we can stand together and work on a better, whether we want to have a southern, eastern region, western region, go back to our regional, ensuring that we rule in our regions. We can't achieve that without having that conversation where, when we get up, we ensure that equity, justice, peace is laid down. My time's up. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
sir.
much, Priscilla. What a brilliant rendition. Fantastic. It goes to show that how important dialogue is. Have the conversation. When you have the conversation, you may see that the person who you thought has two heads and a tail between their legs is not such a monster after all, and that one's views are not that far apart. These of the many important points that Priscilla gave us, I understood that her Ogoni people are believed to have migrated from Ghana. I should be looking more closely at your features with a view to corroborating that fact. She spoke as a post-war child with sharing her insight into the war, largely handed down from the stories passed down from her relations who had direct experience. I loved what she said, that the contradictions, Nigeria is all about contradictions. She said from the constitution, contradictions, right down to how our regions are described, contradictions, causing confusion and conflict. She said, very importantly, our true history has been distorted. This is the root of our confusion and the troubles. And as a latter-day historian, I could not agree with her. I could not agree with her more. It is narrative, I've said recently, kills. The Hiroshima bomb killed hundreds of thousands of people. But narrative, loaded with lies and distortion, kills from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. So the importance of getting our story right and having this discussion between our peoples cannot be overemphasized. She said, I understand my name, Nwikpo, not to be an Igbo name. I understand it as an Ogoni name. We've got to recognize that it is how the individual sees themselves. It's easy for a third party looking in to label us, but you cannot ignore how we see ourselves. And identity is at the roots of everything, is at the roots of how we relate to everybody else. And she said repeatedly that the difficulty that she has with the Biafra label is that we've never been asked about who we want to be. Somebody should speak to us. Her people, the Ogonis, like many other of the nationalities within Nigeria, it's not a unique experience. They've been packaged and bundled and labeled by other people pursuing their agenda. But they've never been asked who they are. How do you see yourselves? She mentioned the experience of domination and suffering of her people, the Ogoni people, and no doubt other Eastern nationalities, at the hands of Igbos during the war, cannot be run away from. In a war situation, there will be what the Westerners like to call collateral damage. Everybody becomes an object of suspicion, an object of fear, because you can't know who's on whose side, especially when third parties are playing one against the other. It's inevitable. One cannot denied that. She said there has to be admissions, there has to be acknowledgements, there has to be apologies, there has to be dialogue in order for us to move forward. She said fundamentally that although she believes in Nigeria as an entity, she acknowledges that the Nigeria state lacks, as it is, it lacks equity. And unquestionably, that if there was equity within the Nigeria entity, within its governance, there will be less agitation for separation. I think Odua nationalists will say yes to that, just as even the hardest core Biafrans will say yes to that. It is the inequity that was programmed into the Nigeria structure that is at the root of the agitation, justifiable agitation, to say if we will not be treated fairly, if we will be treated as a second-class citizen or ethnic group, then we'll rather be number one in our own small kingdom and in our own small world. No self-respecting peoples want to be regarded as inferior to everybody else. We'd rather be by ourselves if that is the alternative. And she concluded with, we've got to have the conversation. It's as simple as that. We've got to talk, just as we are doing.